So, there's a new RuneScape game, RuneScape Dragonwilds. It's a survival game, not an MMO, and I know of games like Valheim and Enshrouded, but I've never had chance to play one, and I've always wanted to. So, on paper, this is like the perfect game to drop for me, but was it actually any good, and should you play it? Well, one thing that's worth mentioning at the very start of this video is that this is an early access build, which of course just means nothing is set in stone, things can change, and not all of the content is in the game as of recording. This also does not take place in the same location as the MMOs. We've sailed away from Port Sarim and ended up on a new continent called Ashenfall. And first off, the character creation is lacking a bit. I was trying to find the wild spikes haircut that I rock in old school, but it wasn't there, so I ended up with a default Conor McGregor bot look. After a couple of cutscenes, I spawned in a Saradomin church. I noticed there's some kind of treasure hiding at the top, but I wasn't able to reach it, so I just moved on with the tutorial quests that the wise old man gave me. For the first tutorial, you're speaking to Doric, and I was fully expecting to see the tutorial island smithing task. You know, the one where you're mining some copper and tin, you smith a bronze dagger. But instead, I'm making some stone tools and weapons, grabbing some food and water, and getting my first few levels in with wood cutting. It's nice to see the skills implemented into this game. They aren't all quite here yet, and all of the crafting skills have also been combined into artisan. So think like smithing, crafting, and fletching. There's also only one melee skill being attack, and magic and ranged aren't quite fully implemented into the game yet either, but you can use them. Anyway, Vanica is up after that, and he quickly teaches me about monster weaknesses like giant rats being weak to stab. Then next up was Zanik, and this is where rune crafting comes in, and it works completely differently to what I'm personally used to in old school. You can literally build your own rune altar wherever the hell you like, and you can craft any kind of rune you want as well. You have to mine the rune essence from these floating rocks, and the essence also stacks, so this is one of the fastest skills to train in the game. Obviously with runes we unlock spells as well, so when you level up your wood cutting you're able to just spawn an axe which instantly cuts down multiple trees, for example. I won't be showing all of the spells in this video, there's quite a lot of them, but I will go over the ones that I found the most interesting. One of them was Windstep, which I used to reach that chest I saw at the beginning, as well as a few others throughout the playthrough. It also helps with fall damage, which is useful for some of the later regions. Which is a good segue into leaving this starter region of Temple Woods and moving on to Bramblemead Valley. Talking with the wise old man, he tells me it's time to set up a base of operations here. So I start cutting down some trees for the wood, and just as I was starting to lay down the foundations, this happened. Let's build. What the fuck was that? What's with the mute? What the heck? I've literally just built my house. Okay. Oh my god. How are they gonna call him the wise old man when he's like, yeah, build your house here, and immediately get spit on by a dragon? Brother. Yeah, so if you've watched any other Dragonwild videos, you'll know one of the complaints was that the dragon randomly attacks you quite a lot throughout the game. The novelty quickly wears off, let me tell you. But luckily, since editing this video, there's been a couple of updates where they've reduced the amount of attacks that it does. So it's not something that you're gonna have to worry about if you end up getting the game yourself. One of the spells that you unlock from leveling construction is the Eye of Oculus, and this is really handy for building, especially when building the roof because you kind of just like float around. It's kind of similar to creative mode in Minecraft. The base building for the most part is really solid. I only built myself a small shack, but some of the builds I've seen on the Discord are insane. One of the updates I saw that was coming to the game in the future was defensive building. Every so often, enemies in the area come and attack you, so it's going to be really fun just blasting them away with catapults or maybe some cannons. After building the house and making some starter equipment, I found my first vault. There's quite a few of these scattered around the map with some nice rewards. Usually crafting recipes for building, at least in the low level ones, but later on you can find recipes for armor sets too. But the main reason you'd want to do these vaults is for the vault cores and shards. The shards are used in a good amount of weapon and armor recipes, and the cores are used to build lodestones, which is how you teleport around the map. After going through that vault, I did some more crafting and exploring, but then started to progress the main quest, which takes you up to these castle ruins. Alright, cool. Cathan's journal. Just waiting for Spitfoot to bring me the keys. What? Oh. Don't think these arrows are gonna do anything. The whole reason I needed to go to that castle was for a journal, which then points me towards a nearby swamp that has another hidden vault. And after finally finding it, I put down a lodestone, then traveled back home where I crafted a mage set. I'd really only been using melee up until this point, so I figured I'd try it out. I also realized after looking at the spells that I unlocked that I had one called Bark to Bones, and I had Bones to Peaches unlocked too. I was really struggling to maintain my food, so I decided to mix the two together, and it basically solved that problem entirely for the rest of the playthrough. Back to the vault now though, and switching to mage was a great idea, especially against some of the vault guardians. They move fairly slowly and you can usually spot them down a corridor, so you can get quite a lot of hits off before they get close. But yeah, I progressed the main quest and got myself another one of those vault cores for another lodestone later on. Returning back to the wise old man, he tells me to gear up the best that I can and progress further by finding an NPC called Cathan. So it's time to move on to the next region, being the Fractured Plains. This area is where I finally found myself the copper and tin that I've been waiting for since the beginning. So I wasted no time mining every single node that I came across. One of the more useful spells for mining is Rock Explosion, which speeds up the process a lot. It does kind of have an annoyingly long cooldown though, and I do hope they decrease that a little bit in the future. After smithing a bronze axe, I could also now cut down the oak trees surrounding my base. Super useful because the logs are used in a lot of the crafting recipes for better armor and weapons too. There aren't many crafting recipes in the game that mirror old school, so if you take for example a bronze plate body, you'd normally only need 5 bronze bars, but in this game you need 10 bronze bars alongside some hard leather and wool thread. So it does take some getting used to. It was also around this point that I realized the chest loot and the dungeons reset on a timer. So I went back to the first vault and looted another core for basically free. I knew I'd have to build out a network of these lodestones to get around the game quickly, but one of the problems was that I couldn't bring loads of these vault cores out with me exploring simply because they weigh so much. So I had a look on the Dragonwilds wiki on how I could get around it, and that's where I found out about the personal chest. It's a spell unlocked with construction, and with this being a RuneScape game, I tried out leveling it the same way I would in old school. So building a ton of items and then destroying them, and to my surprise, it actually worked out pretty well. So now I essentially have a second inventory, and as far as I know it doesn't have a weight limit, so that's why I ended up storing all of my vault cores and other building materials. I figured it was probably a good idea to build one of the lodestones right outside the starter vault. That way I could raid the cores every time they respawned. I also visited one of the other nearby vaults and I found a dragonkin statue that apparently programmed my brain into thinking about a rune crafting guild. I'll have to come back to that one later though. After some more mining, I finally had enough materials to build full bronze, which had way better defensive stats than the regular leather armor that I was wearing before. I went back into the swamp to try and find some more Harrowlanders to help stock up on healing potions, but I ended up running into an abyssal demon, which also turned out to be its own boss fight. I wasn't prepared for this at all, and I tried my best maging it from a distance, but unfortunately, despite having full bronze, it completely destroyed me. Now, the death mechanics in this game as of recording are pretty brutal. You keep all of your armor and your runes, but that's about it. All of your items and your weapons get put in your gravestone and you have to go retrieve them. That doesn't sound too bad unless you've died in a real horrible place surrounded by mobs that can kill you in 2 or 3 hits. Luckily for me though, the Abyssal Demon retreated away from my gravestone, so I was able to sneak back and grab my stuff. While sorting out my inventory, I tried to get eyes on the demon again, but it instantly spotted me instead. I still wasn't prepared for a fight like that, so I just kept dodge rolling and sprinting through the swamp, but it just did not stop chasing me. I found a small cave thinking I could hide in there, but no, Abyssal Demons teleport. So I was trapped in the cave with it. I was kind of panicking at this point. The goblin gave me a slap in the face for being so stupid. And then when I made a sprint for the exit and tried running further away from its spawn, I then realized it was either glitched and stuck inside that cave, or it just got bored chasing me. So I just dumped tons of arrows into it. In regular RuneScape, we call this safe spotting. And I'd love to say that all of that was calculated, but it certainly wasn't. After it died, I got a couple of abyssal spine drops and some other materials which are used in the crafting recipe to build my very own abyssal whip. The only problem was that I also needed ram horns for it, and I hadn't seen any rams in my entire playthrough, meaning they were probably in the next zones that I hadn't been to yet. So I did another run of the vaults, got myself some more cores for lodestones, then started to explore the map a bit, where I then ran into the storm-touched highlands. This place is very hostile. There's lightning strikes that hit your general area every couple of minutes, so if you're in a fight with some mobs, it can be really tricky. I did also end up finding some rams here though, which was great, along with some iron ore, so I could make even more upgrades. I brought the ram horns back to base, and that's the whip built. This is one of those iconic weapons that is great to see in the game. Although it does feel weird being in full bronze and a whip. My melee skill is also nowhere close to 70, which would be the attack level normally needed to equip it. But again, it's worth remembering this is early access. I tested out the whip for a little bit, and then I made my way into another area I hadn't visited yet, being the Blood Blight Swamp. I immediately started taking poison damage here, so I quickly started sprinting back to Fractured Plains and teleported back home to make some anti-poisons. Again, not to keep going on about it, but the recipe for the anti-poisons in this game was Harrowlanders and Bittercap mushrooms. I didn't mention it before, but Harrowlanders are really hard to find, and they're also used for healing potions too. What makes this really annoying is that I have a massive surplus of Marintils, and that's the herb that you'd use in old school RuneScape to make an anti-poison. So yeah, I hope they change that in the future. Anyway, I took a few of those anti-poisons back with me and explored a little bit. Finding some new materials like Blightwood logs, snapdragons for better healing potions, along with gold and silver ores, which gave me a bunch of higher level gems too. I also came across a new vault which had a ton of enemies and some more dragonkin statues, which gave me a much more interesting set of rewards, being a crafting recipe for a new wild archer range set. I also tried to cut down some sap from this huge tree in one of the nearby ruins, as I needed it to progress the main Dragon Slayer quest. But unfortunately, a bronze axe wasn't gonna cut it, so I went back to the Storm-Touched Highlands and gathered a whole bunch more of that iron ore that was scattered about. I really enjoy the mining in this game for some reason. The ores don't respawn instantly, so you kinda have to explore the map for more. But yeah, I made the upgraded axe as well as their pickaxe, and figured I'd go looking into some of the other vaults that I hadn't found yet to see if there were other crafting recipes for armor sets. And sure enough, after a couple of hours exploring, I came across another vault that had a paladin armor set. I had to build some new crafting stations so that I could upgrade the materials for the full recipe, and after another hour or so, I had enough to build the full set. It's basically the exact same as a full set of iron, but it has to be the best in slot for Fashionscape. I then went out exploring some more and came across another boss fight, the Garu King. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And at the time I didn't realize that this was actually a boss for a side quest that I randomly stumbled upon. I was actually looking for a different item entirely that I needed for the Dragon Slayer quest, and it turned out I needed to do some dentistry on this dragon skull instead and take one of the teeth. This now meant that I finally had all of the supplies to build the challenge horn to take on Velgar, so I teleported over to his tower, took out the guard at the front and started the fight. The game has been building up to this incredible moment. This dragon has been griefing me for my entire playthrough. It screamed at me in that castle and has been flying above me at all times. But when it came to actually taking this thing down, it was relatively simple. I feel like half of the moves it was doing, like going in to bite me, weren't actually doing anything. I did get lucky with getting this whip, but I feel like this would be a pretty simple fight even with an iron sword or a battle staff. Again though, it is early access, so hopefully they make this fight a little bit more engaging, and we have to keep in mind that this is the first dragon that you end up fighting. They did say they plan to release a bunch more dragons into the game too. Anyway, I then went back to the wise old man and he rewarded me with a recipe for a dragon blight shield. Not to be confused with a dragon fire shield though. I guess this is going to be used in the future to defend against weak poison attacks. I'm not sure, but like almost everything in this game, it looks great. So the dragon's dead, the main quest is done, but I'm a completionist and so there's still some content left to sweep up. The first place I decided to run to was the runecrafting guild I was told about. I had to clear out some goblins, and after solving a quick dragonkin puzzle, I had a mysterious voice telling me to activate some pillars around the guild. The reward for which was a crafting recipe for the Staff of Light, another iconic weapon from the main game. Luckily I already had enough materials to build it. I got a ton of sapphires from mining gold and silver in that poisonous swamp earlier on. Since I got the whip, I stopped using magic and ranged almost entirely. At least with the whip, I was able to train a skill up, and it destroyed most enemies that I came across. But the Staff of Light was still a nice upgrade for the mage setup regardless. I also built the Wild Archer set that I got the recipes for earlier as well, and it looks like this one has a Gothic theme with the icon on the chestplate. And even though it had lower defense stats than the Paladin set, it was much better for the stamina usage. I figured if there's a melee and a range set, then there must be a mage set hiding out there somewhere, so I explored a vault that I hadn't been in yet. This was probably one of the more dangerous vaults that I'd been in so far with all of its traps, and it had a bunch of hidden areas as well. Sure enough though, I ran into some more dragonkin statues and started finding all of the recipes for a dragonkin mage set. This also fills in the gap for the Saradomian, Gothics and Zamarok sets too. I also guessed that because I'd already found a whip and a Staff of Light, there's probably a big ranged weapon to be found too. So I started mopping up the side quests that I stumbled upon. The first one was with Zanik, which was Goblin Diplomacy. It was pretty simple, I just had to find this Bandosian amulet and hand it back. I figured Zanik would probably have the ranged weapon considering she no-scopes people in the main game, but nope, I got a cool cape instead. After about an hour of exploring, I came across a huge tree in the Fractured Plains with some kind of elven-looking tablet. I'd seen a bunch of these throughout my playthrough, but I couldn't interact with them, but I could with this one. Turns out it was a side quest, and I noticed a quest item going into my inventory being a crystal seed. So I was fairly confident I knew what the reward was going to end up being. This quest was probably the best one in the game from a story perspective. I normally spacebar everything and I don't really care about lore in any RuneScape game, but this one was a nice one. If you end up playing this yourself, then I recommend reading and listening to it rather than spacebarring. Anyway, all I had to do was go and interact with the rest of those tablets I found whilst following a certain path. Then sure enough, at the last tree I got myself the crystal bow. This weapon is absolutely busted as well. The special attack that it has is kind of OP because you can just permanently stun and damage enemies. So, only a couple more side quests left. I went to Doric in the Fractured Plains next, and he needed some help finding out what was hidden by a nearby monument. Turns out I just needed to clear out the place and activate some familiar looking dragonkin statues. Then I entered a nearby vault, and I had to take down a bunch of these tanky guardians. I did get kind of overrun at one point, but I quickly figured out that these guys can't jump. So I put that crystal bow I just got into use. And after claiming the loot, I went back to Doric and got myself a recipe for the granite maul. And something that annoyed me throughout this game was that low level mobs do not lose aggro, which was very, very annoying anytime you step too close to a chicken. So I decided to get some payback. Now, I still have a few side quests to do, but I wanted to take a little break and get some skilling done. You can only level up to 50 in early access, and some of the skills were just naturally maxed out already from playing the game. Also, whilst I couldn't make anti-poisons with those Marintils, I could instead make XP boosting potions. So I made a whole bunch of them for the remaining skills. I started off with wood cutting, and then I finished off construction with all of the supplies. The method I did for cooking is unfortunately patched now, but you could get a bunch of XP from just boiling water. So I set up a bunch of campfires by a river, and I knocked out that one pretty quickly. After that short skilling break, it was back to the remaining quests, and so I started and finished Restless Ghost. I was actually trying to get this done throughout the playthrough, but you can only get it done at nighttime, and I kept falling asleep and completely forgetting about it. Anyway, Vanica was up after that, and it turns out he was the one who wanted that quest item that I got from the Guru King earlier on. So the quest was already part finished for me. I just had to gather some materials and perform a ritual on an altar, then give back that quest item back to Vanica. And then after that was done, I got another cool cape, and I'll probably keep this one too because it fits my clan colors on old school. And yeah, that's essentially the whole game completed. I've beat all of the quests, I've got the max levels currently available, and I also did a bunch of other small completionist things off camera, like grabbing some extra recipes hidden around the game. Overall, I really enjoyed the game. I was quite surprised that I didn't run into hardly any glitches. It seems really well polished, and I'd like to say that this is a really good foundation for what could be an absolutely incredible game. They've already talked about adding farming, magic, and ranged into the game alongside another dragon boss to fight, which is great. I personally would have loved to see fishing added to the game though. I heavily relied on the bones to peaches a little bit too much, and it would have been real nice to build a little fishing dock and just take a break from exploring for a bit. Hunting would also easily fit into this game. I did come across chin chompers and kebbits whilst walking through some woods, and it would be really fun to just launch chin chompers from some kind of cannon and watch things explode. I'm sure they're already thinking about incorporating most, if not all of the skills already though. The only issue in my mind though is that I wanted it to feel more like RuneScape, and by that I mean the progression. I'm in the equivalent of full iron, a dragonfire shield, and I have a whip. That just seems very, very strange to me. I also saw that they polled on the Discord whether they should just skip steel and go straight onto mithril instead. Which, I mean, obviously everyone voted for steel to be in the game. I'm not even sure why that's a question, and it does get me a little bit worried. And whilst I haven't played many of these survival games, I know that there's a ton of them out there. So for this one to stick out and get people playing, I feel like it really has to lean into more RuneScape themes and mechanics. Overall though, I'd say this is a solid game, even in its early stages, and I'm very likely going to be playing every new update that comes out for it too. I had a lot of fun playing it whilst AFK in old school on the side, and it made for a nice break. But now it's time to return back to the main game as I need to go get my Inferno cape done on my Completionist account. I'd also like to thank all of my channel members. At the supporter tier is Madman, Jonas B, CDG, Ciotos, Sisvan, Misks, and Henrik the Epic. At the patron tier we have Daniel and Amity, and a huge thank you as always to my benefactors, Dustis, Casp, and I Am Chomp. Thank you all so much, I'll see you in the next video.